At a press conference, French Prime Minister Elisabeth Borne and a number of other members of President Emmanuel Macron's cabinet proposed a series of pension reforms that would, amongst other things, raise the legal retirement age from 62 to 64. In response, the leaders of France's 8 largest trade unions organized a series of strikes and protests to occur 9 days later. Railways, refineries, and power plants cease operation for 24 hours. The French working class takes to the streets to express their dissent. Hundreds of thousands join them, sparking a still ongoing social movement. After being effectively forced through both the Senate and the National Assembly by the Borne government, the reforms are passed.
S'il vous plaît.
Protests intensify. Negotiations between trade union leaders and the Borne government collapse. The following day, demonstrators, further galvanized by their opposition's unwillingness to compromise, gathered to storm the Paris offices of BlackRock. While the American multinational investment company was not directly involved with the Borne government's pension reforms, it was targeted in retaliation for the significant role it played in the privatization of French pension funds in years prior. As demonstrators rush through the office's ornate front doors, they meet no resistance. In fact, spare a few stragglers near the front desk, the whole place appears to be all but deserted. The demonstrators occupy the lobby for around 30 minutes, lighting off firecrackers and chanting anti-reform slogans before returning to the streets. Yet, even as BlackRock's offices stood empty and firecrackers exploded in the lobby below, company productivity did not falter. In data centers scattered across the globe, Aladdin, the highly sophisticated software platform that facilitates BlackRock's operations, continued to automatically manage the $9.09 trillion in assets that the company presides over, accounting for approximately 8% of the valuation of the entire global economy. The matrix of interlocking machine learning algorithms that comprises Aladdin is now more proficient in asset management than its human counterparts ever were. Its roughly 25 million lines of code are capable of performing comprehensive risk analysis, projecting investment outcomes, executing stock trades, simulating market fluctuations, and breaking down impossibly large datasets nearly instantaneously. The human employees of BlackRock now do little more than provide Aladdin with inputs, interpret its outputs, and act in accordance with them. The labor they perform is akin to the working at nothing that French philosopher Félix Guattari describes in his 1969 essay, Machine and Structure. This working at nothing, in the special sense which people do it today, which tends more and more to be merely a response to a machine, pressing a red or black button to produce an effect programmed somewhere else. Human work, in other words, is only the residue that has not yet been integrated into the work of the machine. This residual human activity is no more than a partial procedure that accompanies the central procedure produced by the order of the machine. And, as the events of April 6 demonstrated, the residual subwork is by no means integral to Aladdin's and thus BlackRock's central procedure, the perpetuation of the growth of capital through the automatization of market processes. This procedure is not endemic to BlackRock. It has become a modality of late capitalist economic formations. Automatizing machines like Aladdin now permeate almost every area of the financial services sector, profoundly influencing the business practices of prominent private equity groups and the firms that they are invested in. Meta, ByteDance, Netflix, Disney, Paramount, Warner Bros. Discovery, and countless other multi-billion-dollar corporations have continued to move further in the direction of automatization. In an attempt to assuage anxieties developing around these new technologies, major media outlets and Silicon Valley technocrats that fund them have begun to work tirelessly at reinforcing the narrative that automatization represents humanity's liberation from the market. Take Forbes, for example. 28-year-old Austin Russell, the 2013 recipient of infamous tech billionaire Peter Thiel's Thiel Fellowship, and founder of hugely successful self-driving car technology company Luminar, purchased an 82% stake in Forbes Global Holdings earlier this year from Reuters. As a part of the deal, Forbes will add a new board to the company consisting of American media, tech, and AI experts. The pages of Forbes are now littered with headlines proclaiming automatization as a boon to humanity, capable of ridding our lives of banal repetition and ushering in a new age of radical creative production. Yet even the most cursory examination of our current material conditions will tell a far different story. The machinic rending apart of the formerly sustaining relations the capital once possessed to the phenomenal that has occurred over the last few decades has not brought with it unprecedented human freedom, nor has it triggered the sort of radical creative production alluded to in the aforementioned Forbes articles. It is, in fact, capital that has been liberated. Its slow division into innumerable machines has essentially alienated us from it, allowing it to operate outside of human perception. And yet, this major paradigm shift in the form of capital seems to have gone largely unnoticed. Why? The dominant conception of capital that contemporary markets broadly operate under, that first introduced by Adam Smith in his 1776 book, The Wealth of Nations, contains within it an epistemological block that has thus far prevented us from fully grasping capital's new form. Largely credited as the foundational text of neoliberal economics, few pieces of economic literature are considered to be as influential as The Wealth of Nations. Smith defines capital as that part of a man's whole stock which he expects is to afford him revenue, identifying its essential characteristic as its capability to reproduce and thus multiply its value. He endeavors to give material to this fairly abstract definition by attributing the source of capital's reproductive capabilities to productive labor, the term he gives to labor which, as he writes, adds to the value of the subject upon which it is bestowed. Upon first glance, this clarification appears to successfully codify Smith's definition of capital in terms of observable economic inputs and outputs, firmly grounding it in the objective, the real. Yet, the whole thing quickly begins to fall apart when one considers the ambiguity of the notion of value upon which it is based. With Smith's positing of value, a secondary quality, or a quality derived purely from the empirical appearance of an object, as the basis of capital, he circumscribes capital to the phenomenal, deftly precluding even mere consideration of the myriad of forms capital may take beyond the confines of our limited realm of subjectivity. This deference to value reveals the metaphysical assumption constricting Smith's perception of capital, termed correlationism by French philosopher Quentin Miliassou in his 2006 book After Finitude. Correlationism consists in disqualifying the claim that it is possible to consider the realms of subjectivity and objectivity in relation to one another. Although works like The Wealth of Nations reveal that a nascent form of correlationism existed in the years prior to the publication of Immanuel Kant's 1781 book, Critique of Pure Reason, it was Kant's book that ossified the correlationist model, and thus redirected virtually all philosophical projects in its wake. Either the predicate B belongs to the subject A as something that is, covertly, contained within this concept A, or B lies entirely outside of the concept A, though, to be sure, it stands in connection to it. Smith's conception of capital exemplifies this model. The predicate capital is either contained within value, or capital lies entirely outside of value, yet still stands in connection to it. Within this framework, capital exists absolutely and inherently in relation to value, effacing the possibility that it could inhabit, as Miliassou writes, an outside which is not relative to us, and which is given as indifferent to its own givenness to be what it is, existing in itself regardless of whether we think it or not. Thus, in the eyes of Smith and the countless other economists who followed in his footsteps and unconsciously adopted the correlationist model, capital cannot exist apart from humanity. There is no empirical basis for this model. Correlationism has all but completely prevented us from becoming cognizant of capital's technological flight from human subjectivity. It has been a stumbling block for far too long. If we are to ever develop a cogent anti-capitalist political project, one that is actually adapted to the increasing complexities of this age of automatization, it is imperative that we dispense with it. So next time you want to stick it to the man, don't storm an office building. Storm a data center. Thanks for watching.